I'm very excited to introduce my good friend and colleague, Rabbi Saul Kassin. Rabbi Kassin is someone that I feel particularly close to and look up to. We are the same age. We were in the same class at times. We played an interesting switch in that I grew up in Deal, New Jersey and went to Hillel Yeshiva, and he grew up in Brooklyn, New York and went to the Yeshiva of Flatbush. And we both went into the rabbinate. And I live on Avenue S, and he is the rabbi of West Deal Shul, where I grew up. I'm the principal in the Yeshiva of Flatbush, and he's the Rosh Yeshiva of Hillel Yeshiva in Deal. And it's a pretty interesting switch. Rabbi Kassin is a Talmid Chacham who comes from a long line of Talmidei Chachamim. Indeed, his grandfather is the chief rabbi of the Syrian Sephardic community of Brooklyn, New York, and he succeeded his father, Rabbi Jacob, and his grandfather, Rabbi Saul, both chief rabbis of the Syrian Sephardic community, and their family goes back all the way to the old countries where they were rabbis as well, and Rabbi Saul continues in that tradition. But Rabbi Saul is not only a rabbi that is in touch with the tradition and the Torah, he's also someone that understands the way that we live, the style that we live, and can connect with each and every one of us. So I know that he's excited to speak with you, and I believe you're excited to hear from him as he is to speak with you. So without any further ado, I introduce my good friend and colleague, Rabbi Saul Kassin.
Thank you, Rabbi Beda, for that very warm introduction. I also want to recognize my teacher, my rabbi when I was here, and in Brooklyn also, in the Bet Knesset, Rabbi Raymond Harari, your head of school, who guided me when I was younger to the path that I'm on today. I believe, I'm not positive, but I think I see Rabbi Thaler who's walking in, and I just want to make a special mention. Rabbi Thaler was my Gemara teacher. More importantly, he taught us how to play basketball. I don't see everybody else in the room, but certainly I have very, very strong memories of Rabbi Prague, who was my halakha teacher as well here in the school. Rabbi Besser, who is now expanding everything that he does all over our community, and all those wonderful people that make this institution what it is. I want to thank also Mrs. Zoltzman for reaching out to me, having me come here. I also see Mrs. Hidary, cousin of mine, Mrs. Sanders I saw earlier. And the reason why I mention all the names that I can is because I will tell you that I have a tremendous amount of hakarat hatov to Flatbush Yeshiva. For everything that it did for me in my high school years, and for everything that I took with me from the yeshiva, I have a tremendous amount of hakarat hatov. Rabbi Beda mentioned that we're colleagues. Actually, this is my 25th year since graduating Flatbush. It's the 25th year from my graduating class, and it's really an honor and a privilege for me to be here. I'd like to begin with a somewhat dramatic story that's brought in the book of Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust by Mrs. Yafa Eliach. She writes, in the Janowska Road concentration camp there was a foreman, a Jewish foreman by the name of Schneeweiss, one of those people that you stay away from if you value life. He had known of a rabbi called Rabbi Saul Spira, but wasn't aware that that rabbi was actually an inmate in his camp. There was only a few handful of students of the rabbi who were close to him and knew his identity and knew that he was in the camp. The season of the Jewish holidays was approaching, and as the date of Yom Kippur was nearing, the fears in the camp mounted. Everyone knew that the Germans especially liked to use the Jewish holidays as days for inflicting terror and death. It was the eve of Yom Kippur. The tensions and fear were at their height. A few of the rabbi's students came to the rabbi and asked him to approach Schneeweiss and request that on Yom Kippur their group not be assigned to any of the 39 main categories of work, so that their transgressions of the law by working on Yom Kippur would not be a major one. The rabbi, moved by their request, and despite his fears, went to Schneeweiss. He knew quite well that Schneeweiss did not have much respect for Jewish tradition. Even prior to the outbreak of the war, he had publicly violated the Jewish holidays and transgressed Jewish law. Here in Janowska, he was a cruel man who knew no mercy. So with a heavy heart, the rabbi approached Schneeweiss. "You probably heard of me. I am Rabbi Saul Spira," he said. "You are a Jew like myself. Tonight is Kol Nidre night. There's a small group of young students who do not want to transgress any of the 39 melachot. It means everything to them. It's the essence of their existence. Can you do something about it? Can you help? I beg you to do it for us, so that we still find some dignity in our humiliating existence." Schneeweiss turned to the rabbi and said, "Tonight I can't do a thing. I have no jurisdiction over the night brigade, but tomorrow, on Yom Kippur, I will do for you what I can." They shook each other's hands, and the rabbi left. In the morning, the rabbi and a small group of young Hasidim were summoned to Schneeweiss's cottage. "I heard that you prayed last night. I don't believe in prayers," he said. "On principle, I even oppose them. But I admire your courage, for you know well that the penalty for prayer in Janowska is death." But with that, he mentioned them to follow him. He took them to the SS headquarters in the camp, to a large wooden house. "You fellows will shine the floor without any polish or wax. And you, Rabbi, clean the windows with dry rags, so that you will not transgress any of the 39 categories of work." He left the room abruptly without saying another word. At about 12 o'clock noon, the door opened wide, and into the room stormed two angels of death. SS men in their black uniforms. They were followed by a food cart filled to capacity. "Noontime. Time to eat bread, soup, meat," announced one of the SS men. The room was filled with an aroma of freshly cooked food, such food as they had not seen since the German occupation. White bread, steaming hot vegetable soup, and huge portions of meat. The tall SS man commanded in a high-pitched voice, "You must eat immediately. Otherwise you will be shot on the spot." None of them moved. The rabbi remained on the ladder, the students on the floor. The Germans repeated the order. The rabbi and the students remained glued to their places. The SS man called to Schneeweiss. "Schneeweiss, if the dirty dogs refuse to eat, I will kill you along with them." Schneeweiss pulled himself to attention, looked the German directly in the eyes, and said in a very quiet tone, "We Jews do not eat today. Today is Yom Kippur, our most holy day of atonement. You don't understand, Jewish dog. roared the taller of the two. "I command you in the name of the Fuhrer and the Third Reich." Schneeweiss, composed, his head high, repeated the same answer. "We Jews obey the law of our tradition. Today is Yom Kippur. Today is the day of fasting." The German took out his revolver from his holster and pointed it at Schneeweiss's temple. Schneeweiss remained calm. He stood still at attention, his head high. A shot pierced the room. Schneeweiss fell. On the freshly polished floor, a puddle of blood was growing bigger and bigger. The rabbi and his students stood as if frozen in their places. They could not believe what their eyes had just witnessed. Schneeweiss, the man who in the past had publicly transgressed against their Jewish tradition, had sanctified God's name and died a martyr's death for the sake of Jewish honor. It's the power of Yom Kippur. It's the power of Teshuva. And it's the power of Jewish identity. Because no one ever knows when that feeling of Jewish identity will cause someone to act. I want to relate to you one more story from the Midrash. There's a Midrash in Bereshit that talks about when the enemies came to destroy the Bet HaMikdash. They came to plunder the Bet HaMikdash. They didn't know their way around. So they needed a guide. They needed someone to help navigate. And they picked on somebody called Yosef Meshisa, the Midrash says, and they took him. And he served as a traitor to the Jewish people, a traitor to his nation. And he helped out the enemy. And he showed them around the Bet HaMikdash. And they told him that as payment for what he had done, he could take anything he wants from the Bet HaMikdash with him. So he went inside, and he brought out, the Midrash says, the menorah. The menorah from the Bet HaMikdash. When they saw that he took out the menorah, they said, "That menorah is not appropriate for a commoner like you. Go back and take something else, and that you could keep." And then Yosef Meshisa replied, "I can't go back in." And they promised him all sorts of things. And he said, "I can't go back in. Is it not enough that I angered my God and defiled his temple one time? I should have to do it again. I cannot go back in." And as the enemy tortured him, he mourned and lamented, "Woe unto me, for I have angered my Creator." Minutes prior, he had no issue. He had no problem accommodating the enemy and serving as a traitor. But something hit him. Suddenly he was moved, and he was inspired to think about who he was, to think about his Creator. And as the Rambam writes in Hilchot Teshuva, "Afilu avad kol yamav ve'asa teshuva," that even if a person transgressed their entire lives, but they made proper repentance, be'yom tato, even the day of death, umet b'tshuvato, and the person dies in their repentance, kol avonotav nimhalim, their sins are forgiven. And although both of these stories are dramatic stories of those who were far from our tradition and religion initially, maybe far from where we may be, the message that emanates from them should resonate within us. And that is that when the emotion hits, when your spiritual antenna is up, it's time to act. It's time to act immediately. I have the privilege, I would say about twice a year, at least for the last 7 to 8 years, to go to Israel. Once is usually on senior trip, and the second time is for usually a bar mitzvah in the family or something else. And a few years back, I was on a plane going to Israel, one of those flights that you take that you have to pray on the plane, shaharit. And I pray in my seat usually, so I took out my tefillin and I prayed. And I finished, and I noticed there was a man a few rows in front of me who was also praying. He had a small beard. And when he finished, I saw that he started approaching other people on the plane. Looked like he was asking them if they wanted to put on tefillin. And truth be told, I was a little cynical in my mind. I said, what is he doing? He's asking people, he's bothering them. Not only that, if he's approaching someone that doesn't put on tefillin, so they're going to put it on once, what's going to happen? Anyway, I continued to watch. He approached a man in the middle seat, I would say upper 60s, 70 years old. And he seemed to have asked him if he wanted to put on tefillin. The man looked at his wife. She nodded. He decided he was going to put on tefillin. The wife got out of the aisle seat. This man came to sit next to him, started putting on tefillin. The wife was in the aisle. She started taking pictures and videoing like it was his bar mitzvah. And as I inched a little closer to see what was happening, I saw this man with tears coming down his eyes, crying with such emotion while he put on his tefillin. And I don't know if he put on his tefillin after this happened or not. But I could tell you that the emotions that he showed at that moment was so palpable that if he followed through on the way he was feeling at that very moment, there's no doubt in my mind that he certainly would put tefillin on again, and he'd be able to climb the spiritual ladder. And that message is a message for all of us right before Yom Kippur. Because although we don't feel it all the time, see, our day is filled. It's filled with so many things on our schedule. We have school, we have work, we have activities. So it's hard sometimes to feel it. It's hard to stop and think about it. But when we do feel it, like, for example, when I pray on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and I think about my wife and I think about my children, that's when I start to feel it. When my prayers feel genuine and real, it's at that moment that a person needs to take advantage, because it's those moments that really are our true self coming out. And you never want that moment to pass without having changed or having done something for ourselves for the better and for our Creator. Now I know that that's easier said than done. Obviously it's easier said than done, because when we come out of Yom Kippur, we are inspired. And we come out and say we're going to commit to certain things year in and year out. We're going to commit to change. And we do promise to come back to our Creator. But in many instances, it doesn't hold. So I would like to suggest the advice of the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai comments on a pasuk in the Torah that we read recently. The Ben Ish Chai comments on the pasuk that says, "Ki tivneh bayit hadash ve'asita ma'akeh legagecha ve'lo tasim damim bebetecha." There's a law, and the law is that when you build a new house, it actually applies to all houses, you have to make a fence to your roof. You have to make railings. You have to have protection, the Torah says, because if not, ve'lo tasim damim bebetecha, then you'll be responsible if someone gets hurt. And that's the halacha. You have to make railings, you have to make gates, You have to have protection. And there's no doubt that that is the simple way of understanding the pasuk, and that's the halacha. But the Ben Ish Chai says that there's a deeper, symbolic, significant meaning to this pasuk. Because he says it doesn't only apply to a new house. Why does the Torah only say Ki tivneh bayit hadash? So the Ben Ish Chai says that the deeper meaning is Ki tivneh bayit hadash means when you are going to start anew. When a person decides that they're going to make a new life for themselves. Teshuva. When a person wants to return, ve'asita ma'akeh legagecha. Make sure that when you do that, you make a fence to your roof. Remember that unless you erect some kind of restraining fence, a person is liable to fall again. Because past weaknesses don't just disappear because a person has good intentions and because a person is emotional. The only way for someone to produce a lasting teshuvah is by recognizing and understanding personal weaknesses, taking steps to prevent ourselves from falling back into those same behavioral patterns. Erecting a boundary, the Ben Ish Chai says, means putting checks and balances in place that will keep us distant and removed from certain situations and certain people and things that we know that have the potential to bring out the worst in us. So it's not just about feeling the emotion. It's about putting certain things in place. It's about making sure that we introspect and think and look inside ourselves. And in order to do that, that necessitates time. A person needs time to be able to reflect. A person needs time to be able to think about themselves honestly. So not only does a person have to act on their emotion, but they have to put a plan in place. But there's one more thing that I think is very important. A few weeks ago, we read about the bikurim. Bikurim are the fruits, the first fruits that a person has after they've been plowing and doing everything they need to do. They finally have their first fruits. And the Torah says that those bikurim, those first fruits, you can't eat. You have to take them actually to Yerushalayim. You have to take them to the Kohen. And that's where you can benefit from the fruits. But what's strange about that law is in the pasuk in the Torah over there, it says that when a person goes to the Kohen, he has to make a certain declaration. And that declaration that's made is that Lavan tried to destroy me. And I went down to Egypt, and Egypt made us work hard. And Egypt was evil to us. And a person makes this declaration as they bring the bikurim. So the rabbis ask, what does bringing the fruits have to do with Lavan, or have to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim or Egypt? What's the connection? So I think the connection is as follows. When Yaakov Avinu went to Lavan, he spent more than 20 years by Lavan's house. Lavan wasn't honest with him. Lavan tried to trick him. Lavan taught him business ways that were incorrect. And when it was all said and done, when it was all finished, Lavan, when Yaakov is about to come back to his family and he's going to meet up with Esav, he sends a message to Esav. And the message that he sends to Esav is, Im Lavan garti v'ayharad ata. He says, I lived with Lavan all this time. And you know the famous Rashi says over there that Yaakov was sending a message to Esav. Im Lavan garti v'taryag mitzvot shamarti. Not necessarily literally, but I lived with Lavan for more than 20 years and I didn't lose the values of my father. I was able to keep up with what Yitzchak taught me, what Abraham Avinu taught me. I wasn't distracted. I didn't lose focus. I didn't get off the goal of what I was trying to accomplish. When a person brings bikurim, they remind themselves of the story of Lavan. And they also remind themselves of the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. You see, when Moshe Rabbeinu came to the Jewish people while they were in Egypt, he gave them hope and he said, we're going to get out. And the Pasuk says, Vaya'amen ha'am. They believed Moshe Rabbeinu. And Paro heard about this and he said, Moshe, what are you doing? And what did Paro do in response to the Jewish people thinking about maybe they would get out? It says he inundated them with work. He made them work harder. He no longer gave them the materials that they needed to be able to build. Because Paro understood that if I make them work very hard and I make them busy with other things, they're not going to be able to think about God. They're not going to be able to think about Hashem. They're not going to be able to think about Moshe Rabbeinu. They're going to be distracted by what it is that I give them. So when this man goes to bring his bikurim to Yerushalayim, he remembers Lavan who tried to distract him. He remembers Yetziat Mitzrayim where they tried to distract us. And he brings his bikurim and he says, these fruits also could be a distraction to me. The fruits are my enjoyment in life. Everything that I enjoy doing. My produce. And so that I don't get distracted by that, I'm going to bring it to Yerushalayim. I'm going to bring it to Israel as a reminder to me that I can't get distracted. So it's a beautiful idea. Lavan couldn't distract us. Yetziat Mitzrayim couldn't distract us. And the bikurim should not distract us. In life, it's the same thing. You have people out there like the Lavans of the world that are going to try to teach us how not to behave in business, how to do things that are incorrect. We have to stay the course. There are going to be people in our lives like Paro that are going to make us work hard and convince us that that's the most important thing, to work all day long and all night long and not think about God. And we have to remain focused. And then there's going to be the enjoyments of life. The things that we enjoy doing. The things that you enjoy doing that also could distract a person. And we bring the bikurim with the message that we're not going to allow these things to distract us. It's not enough for a person to feel their Jewish identity. It's not enough for a person to get emotional about that and act on it. You have to have a plan. You have to have a fence. You have to have an idea of how you're going to make it happen. But just as important as all of that is the importance not to get distracted in life. You know, I mentioned earlier that I graduated here 25 years ago. And I will tell you that I have friends today, Rabbi Beta can tell you the same thing, that I have friends today that have come to me after 20 to 25 years and have said to me, I don't know what happened. I got distracted for 20 to 25 years. I don't know what I did. Yes, I worked. Yes, I did certain things, but I mean distracted from God. I mean distracted from religion. Distracted from what Yaakov Avinu understood he couldn't get distracted from. And my message to you today, as you go into the holiday of Kippur, is make a plan. But more importantly, it's not just a plan for today. It has to be a plan that allows you to plan into the future and to understand that people get distracted along the way. And if you can put measures into your lives so that you don't get distracted, so that you stay the course, the Teshuva will eventually hold. Those of you that are seniors, I remember sitting at high school graduation in Flatbush, and they asked us, whoever's going to Israel, to stand. And I stood, and a bunch of my classmates stood up. Those of you that have the ability to go to Israel for the year, you should go. Boys and girls alike. There are a lot of places that you can go to today. And that gives you a grounding so that when you do go out there into the world and you do all the things that are necessary to do, that you don't allow yourself to be distracted. And those of you that are not yet graduating, those of you that are freshmen, sophomore, juniors, don't allow the day-to-day work and the other things that are in your life to distract you. Because if they do, then you may come along in 10, 15, 20 years and say to a friend of yours, I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how I got so distracted. It should be the will of Hashem that this yeshiva, which is a very holy institution, should continue to guide you, the students, in the ways of the Torah, in the ways of the mitzvot. We should all do Teshuva Shelema, a complete Teshuva, and we'll see the coming of Mashiach in Rabbi. Amen.